Hey everyone, this is going to be part 10 of the Create a WhatsApp Web Clone with Appwrite and Vue.js. It's hard to believe we're already at part 10, and we're still going strong. So let's jump right into things. So the first thing that we'll notice is that after the upgrade of Appwrite, we now get like a not a number, not a number, / not a number. That's because of the way that Appwrite now stores timestamps. They used to store it in milliseconds or something like that, and now it's stored in dates. So let's go fix that really quickly. So let's jump into the code, and it's in the chat item.vue. And essentially all it's going to be is props.chat.created@, and we'll create the new date like that. The other thing we're going to do is +1 over here, is because the months start at 0 for some odd reason in JavaScript. And there we go. So we have 410, 610, which was created today. Cool. So let's continue from here. The first thing that we're going to need is really a way to create a message and a way to get our messages. So let's go to our database file, database. And the first thing we'll notice here is that there's a red thing over here. And this is because we upgraded from Appwrite 9 to Appwrite 10, rather the NPM package. So we have to now fix this. And the reason it's complaining is because instead of passing in the database ID in the constructor over here, we now have to pass it in to our actual function over here. So all we have to do is just add in database ID and import that, obviously. And now that's fine. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually create a message. So we're going to export an async function called create message, and it's going to be of type message. So let's actually create the interface for a message. So export the interface for a message. So a message will have contents, which is a string. It will have a user ID, which is a string, and these are just the attributes we defined in the database, or in the collection rather. Group ID, which is a string, and then email, which is a string. Cool. And our create message function is going to just accept a message. And I'll just hold on 1 second. I'm going to close out. I have WhatsApp opened in a different tab and it's making a notification noise, so I'm just going to close that out. Alright, cool. Getting back to things. Let's go back to our code. Sorry about that. So we have our create message function, where we will now say return databases.create document, and we're going to pass through the database ID, the collection, well, we actually have to add the messages collection to here now. So that's going to be messages, and collection dot messages. We want a unique ID. So Appwrite now provides a ID helper over here. So an ID unique. We want the message, which is the actual data, and then we need permissions. This is where things get interesting. So if we think about what permissions we want, so what we would really want is that anyone on the team or anyone in the group can view the message. Only the current user can update, and well, no, that's not actually what we want. What we actually want is like this. We want is for all team owners, or group admins rather, should be able to delete any message. They should also be able to update any message. And then the current user should be able to update their own message. And all the members on the group should be able to read the message. Unfortunately, Appwrite's permission model makes this a little bit clunky to do. So for now, we're just going to say that everyone on the current team or in this group has permission to read. And the only person who has permission to write, that would be create, update, delete, is going to be the current user. So let's do that now. So permission And Appwrite gives us a helper classes for all this stuff. So permission.read, role.team, and anyone who's on the message.group ID. Right, so this means any member in this group has permission to read this document. Additionally, we also want to say permission.write, role.user, and then the owner, message.user ID. And if we look at what actually Appwrite offers, permission. They have create, delete, read, update. These are for more granular permission models. Technically, we would be able to, for example, say permission.write, role.team, message.user, role.team, message.group ID, and we're able to pass a role here. We'd say owner. But unfortunately, this doesn't work just yet. I opened up an issue with Appwrite, and hopefully they'll get that sorted out. But if we want to do that, we'll have to do it through an Appwrite function, which we'll probably do in a later stage once we get up to the delete functionality. Okay, in the meantime, let's just leave it like this. So we're creating a message, and then the next function we want to do is export async function. This is going to get our messages. So get messages for a group ID string, and we're going to return a promise and a message model. And we're making a different interface for this is because the message that returns to the DB has an ID attribute. It's going to have the created attribute and things like that, which we're going to need. So let's actually just create that that interface. So let's go to source and let's create a new file called models.ts, and this is in our root. We're going to say export interface message model. It's going to have an ID string. It's going to have a user ID, and we're just going to camel case all these things. Group ID as opposed to the snake case that's in the Appwrite database. Email, which is a string, and we're going to have contents, which is a string. And going back to our database now, we're just going to import the message model, and it's going to return an array of messages. And essentially what we want to do is like this. We want to return databases.list documents. Now we want the database ID. We want the collection.messages. Then there's going to be a query. So the Appwrite query helper class, query.equal. And we're going to say where the group ID is equal to the current group ID. Okay. Then. So we now have a result, and we want to map the result.documents into these message model data structures. So we're going to have a document, and inside here we're going to basically just return ID is equal to document.id. The user ID is going to be equal to document.user ID. Group ID is going to be equal to document.group ID. Contents is going to be equal to document.contents, and the email is going to be equal to document.email. Email. Cool. So now that that is up and running, the next thing we need to do is create a store for our messages. Just like we have a group store, so we're going to need to create a message store.ts. And this is where we're going to store all our messages. This is where we're going to update when we receive a new message in real time. So let's just set this up. So we're going to say export const use message store. And that's equal to define store. And it's going to be message store. This will have a state property which returns an object. And let's just create the interface for the state, and it's going to have messages, which is message model, and an array of messages. And to start off with, messages will just be an empty array, and we're going to say as state so that we have the type safety. Now we're going to need a few actions. the first action is going to be an async get messages. This is the way we're going to say, basically load the messages into the store. So it needs a group ID, and we get a group ID, and we're going to say this dot messages is equal to await get messages, group get messages from our database file, group ID. And we're just going to console log here to make sure that we have everything set up once we get there. The next thing we're going to need is a function on message received, right? And this is going to be when we have the real time set up very soon. So we're going to want to be able to dynamically push the message that we received into this array so that it renders out in real time. So the on message received will receive a message model, and all it will do is this dot messages dot push message. Cool. And the last thing we're going to need over here is a getter. And a getter we're going to need because the real time will listen for all messages, and we only want to display the messages that are part of the current group. So let's have a getter that filters out based on the current group. So we're going to say messages for group is equal to state. Well, it's equal to an arrow function which accepts the state. And since getters don't accept other arguments, we're going to have to return a new function which accepts the argument, and this returns state.messages.filter, and we're going to filter where the message, so where the message.group ID is equal to group ID. And that is our message store set up. So now let's move on to actually sending a message, and we're going to be sending our first message very soon. The first thing I want to do beforehand is just go to our Tailwind config file and just create a few custom classes. So we say we're going to want the owner message to have a custom class, and this is like the green versus white background of the messages that I send versus I received. So this is going to be the hash sign D9FDD3, and we also want the chat background, chat BG, since we don't want it plain white, so we're going to try to emulate the background of WhatsApp as closely as possible. So EFEAE2. So that's EFEAE2. So now we have those colors. So if we go to our chat history and just bring that in BG dash custom, and we want the chat BG and see what that looks like. If we go back to our page, which browser window was it? And then click here. So you can see that this is looking really similar to the WhatsApp interface. So that's getting very exciting. We're going to want to send a message soon, so let's code that functionality right now. So let's go to here, and you're going to say chat input. And in the chat input, we are going to say that when I click on the send button, or when I press enter, I want to actually send the message. So we're going to say async function send message. So we need a few things here. So first of all, we need the current group ID. So group store is equal to use group store. And then we're going to say const group ID is equal to group store dot current group dot ID. Now, if there is no group ID yet, meaning we're not in a current group, so we don't want to do anything since we don't know where to send it to. The next thing we're going to need is the session, which is going to be equal to await account, which is an Appwrite API dot get session current. And then we also need the current account, is going to be equal to await account.get. And this is going to give us all the information we need to create our message. So await create message. And this accepts a user ID, which is the session.user ID. We have the email, which is equal to the current account.email. We have the group ID, which is equal to group ID. And we have the contents, which is equal to message text dot value. And that creates the message in the database. And after that, we just want to clear out the message text dot value is equal to an empty string. And let's test this out. So we want to do this in two places, either at keyup.enter, and we're going to say send message, or when I click at click, so send message. Cool. So let's actually see what happens. So let's refresh the page and go to awesome people and say hello. So we got a error, which is always a good sign. So if we open that up over here, we're just going to need to refresh and actually record the network traffic all and just say hello. So you can see we got a error. Okay, no problem. The reason we got an error is probably because we don't have permissions set up properly over here. So we didn't do that properly. So, rather, I didn't do that properly. So if we go to add role, we want to say any can create and document security enabled. And we're going to update that. And with that updated, we can now send the message again, or rather send it for the first time. And if we go to our documents, we should see that we now have a document by jacob@test.com. So that's really cool. So the next thing we need to do is actually make it show up. So the way we're going to make it show up is by actually subscribing to the real-time event. Okay, fine. So let's just do that because we only have about 3-4 minutes left in this one. So we're going to go to main.ts. And actually, before I even code this, I have to explain it a little bit. So just like we created a Appwrite function that reacts to a specific event when we add a member to a group, so we can actually react to specific events from our code using the Appwrite npm package. So we're going to want to react to the event that occurs when a document is added to the messages collection. And what's really cool about this is that Appwrite handles all the permissions. So we're never going to be able to subscribe to an event, to a message that doesn't belong to us or that we don't have access to. So let's actually just jump right into it. I think the best way to see how it works is by actually doing it. So we're going to go to our main TS, and underneath our create app, we're going to say const message store equal to use message store. Then we're going to say client.subscribe, and we want to subscribe to the databases.whatsapp.collections.messages.documents. And that seems really long, but essentially we're subscribing to the documents in the messages collection in the WhatsApp database. So when that happens, we're going to get an event. And for now, we'll just console log that event so that we can see that everything is hooked up properly. If we go to our front end and just refresh the page and go here and we say hello, you'll see that we got an event. And this event contains a payload which has the hello message, which is really cool if you think about it. I mean, this type of functionality would take a really long time to create, this real-time aspect. So that we got it for free is quite unbelievable, and it's why I like Appwrite so much. So let's actually store that in our message store now. So we're going to say const payload is of type any, and it's equal to event.payload. And then we're going to say message store dot on message received, and we're going to say the ID is equal to the payload dot $ID. We have the contents, which is equal to the payload dot contents. We have the user ID, which is equal to the payload dot user ID. We have the group ID, which is equal to the payload dot group ID. And we have the email, which is equal to payload dot email. And if we go to on message received, just to prove that this is working, let's console log this.messages. Since this is where we're going to be rendering the messages from, we're going to want this.messages. So just to double check that everything is working properly, we're going to go to the group and say 1. You can see that we have 1 item in the array. 2. We now have 2 items in the array. And if we look at what they actually contain, so we have 1 and 2. And these are the 2 messages that we sent. And this event subscription is going to work on all the members in the group, and this is how the real-time is going to be implemented. And that's going to be in the next video, so it's going to be a really exciting one. We're finally going to see messages appearing on screen. We're going to test it out between 2 different users, and I'm super excited. I mean, this is really what WhatsApp's functionality is about. I mean, it took us a nice amount of time to get here, but we have to make sure to get the foundations right so that we can build on top of it. Alright, so I will see you guys in the next video. In the meantime, have a good one. Bye-bye.